Hello, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 29 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people.
Reference of Thursday, May the 12th, this committee is meeting on the study of Bill C-11, an act to amend the Broadcasting Act and to make related and consequential amendments to other acts. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of November the 25th, 2021. And members who are attending in the room and others are remotely using Zoom. As per the directive of the Internal Economy of March 10th, those who are in the room should wear a mask. And I actually encourage people to wear a mask to speak, because that's when particles are spewed, so to speak. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. Wait, please, so that I can recognize you before you speak. If you look at the bottom of your screen, for those who are virtual, you will see that there's a microphone icon. Please click on that to unmute yourself and click on it to mute again when you're not speaking. Interpretation, there's a globe at the bottom of your screen that is used for interpretation. You may go to English or French or whatever suits you. And for those in the room, you know that you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. I also want to recognize that no photographs should be taken of this meeting. And finally, that if you want to speak, you should speak through the chair. So thanks very much. I just wanted to welcome our long and patient witnesses. That's all I can say. You guys have patience. And so I would like to welcome, as an individual, J.J. McCullough and the Association Québécoise de la Production Médiatique, Hélène Messier, President and Chief Executive Officer. Then we have BCE Inc. with Jonathan Daniels, Vice President, and Karine Moses, Vice Chair, Quebec, and Senior Vice President, Content Development and News. Black Screen Office, Joan Jenkinson, Executive Director, Canadian Media Producers Association, Reynolds Maston, President and Chief Executive Officer, Catherine Winder, Chief Executive Officer, Wind Sun Sky Entertainment, Inc. And then we have Friends, Marla Boltman, Executive Director, Public Interest Advocacy Center, John Lawford, Executive Director and General Counsel. So what we will do now is each association, each group will have 5 minutes. You can divide who speaks in that 5 minutes amongst yourselves. But you have 5 minutes. I will give you a 30-second, I keep saying 30 minutes, a 30-second notice so that you know you should wrap up. So when everyone is finished, we will then move to a question and answer segment. So I now begin with Ms. McCullough, to J.J. McCullough. I cannot see J.J. McCullough.
Yes.
Begin, please.
Hello, friends. My name is J.J. McCullough, and I am a professional YouTuber from New Westminster, BC. Today, I hope to teach the committee about Canada's vast YouTuber community and why so many of us fear Bill C-11, a bill we did not ask for, do not need, and threatens the success we've already achieved. My channel's subject matter is mostly cultural analysis with a focus on Canadian identity. My video topics have ranged from a biography of Wilfrid Laurier to the history of potato chips to why different political parties use different colors. My most popular video is about a Dairy Queen in my community, which has been viewed over 8 million times. Professional YouTubers like me earn a living from in-video advertisements, with ad revenue generally correlating with the popularity of our videos. A YouTuber's subscriber count can offer a very rough estimate of their channel's potential audience size. My channel recently passed 750,000 subscribers. In total, my videos have been viewed 230 million times. Now, these numbers might sound impressive, but I am actually one of this country's mid-level YouTubers at best. According to socialblade.com, I am merely the 414th most popular Canadian YouTuber. Indeed, according to Social Blade, there are over 100 Canadian YouTubers with over 3.5 million subscribers and over 1 billion video views. But popularity at this level isn't necessary for success. My friend Joe Lee is a professional Canadian YouTuber who makes videos about life in Vancouver and was recently able to parlay the popularity of his channel into his own clothing line. He has just 156,000 subscribers and 12 million views, making him the 945th most popular Canadian YouTuber. This should hopefully offer a sense of the size of the YouTuber community as a faction of the Canadian cultural economy. The tremendous success and even worldwide fame of many Canadian YouTubers in the absence of government regulation should invite questions about the necessity of Bill C-11. An unregulated YouTube has been a 17-year experiment, and the result has been an explosion of popular Canadian content produced by Canadians of every imaginable demographic. Now, much of the debate around Bill C-11 has centered on so-called user-generated content, which is often implied to mean frivolous social media posts. But Section 4.2 states that government is interested in regulating content that, quote, generates revenues, which describes the sort of videos professional YouTubers create. Regardless, it is important to understand that it is simply impossible to regulate a platform like YouTube without also regulating creator content. It's like promising not to regulate books while regulating what can be sold in bookstores. Hence, Section 7 of this bill states that online platforms must, quote, clearly promote and recommend Canadian programming. But what is Canadian programming? We know from the precedent of television that merely having a work produced by a Canadian is not good enough for the CRTC. The nationality of basically everyone involved, from editors to musicians to visual effects artists, must be factored in too. A detailed budget is expected, and the project's theme and subject matter must be explained. The CRTC website features countless forms TV producers must fill out in order to get their work certified as officially Canadian and thus worthy of promotion on Canada's heavily regulated airwaves. Most Canadian YouTubers shudder at the thought that this could soon be our fate as well. Given the broad powers of the CRTC, which Bill C-11 expands to include digital platforms, the Canadian YouTuber community is right to worry that the continued success of their channels could soon be dependent on their ability to make content that's Canadian enough to obtain government endorsement. Even more ominously, Section 9 of this bill says the CRTC can dictate, quote, the proportion of programs to be broadcast that shall be devoted to specific genres on digital platforms. Given that YouTubers make videos of every genre imaginable, from fitness to architecture to political commentary, it is frankly terrifying to imagine that government may soon have a hand in determining which genres of video are more worthy of promotion than others. In summary, anyone proud of the tremendous success of Canadians on YouTube should be deeply concerned about the damage Bill C-11 could do to their livelihoods. I also worry that the dreams of the next generation of Canadian YouTubers will become less achievable once they're forced to navigate intimidating new regulatory hurdles my generation did not. But most of all, I fear the damage that will be done to Canada's legacy as a global leader of cultural entrepreneurship once our online creators are forced to make narrowly nationalistic content under duress in order to win the favor of a government in denial of what we've accomplished on our own. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I go to Ms. Messier for 5 minutes, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Dr. Fry. Thank you for inviting me. I am Helen Messier. I'm the president and CEO of the Association Québécoise de la Production Médiatique, or the Quebec Association for Media Production. Our association advises, represents, and supports more than 160 Quebec independent production companies working in film, television, and the web. Indeed, our members also produce content for online platforms such as documentaries and web series. As such, many of them are also digital-first creators. On January 29, 2021, I appeared before the same Canadian Heritage Committee to stress the importance and urgency of passing Bill C-10. A year later, here I am repeating the same message about C-11. And where are we 1 year on? Both national Canadian productions and Quebec productions are in decline. Less and less Canadian content is being produced in Canada. In fact, 58% of spending in the Canadian audiovisual sector is now done by companies headquartered outside of Canada. Independent production companies now account for 31% of production volume, 35% last year, and broadcasters' in-house productions, news, public affairs, or sports programs account for 11%. Some will say that it's all very well for Canada to be a haven for foreign companies, but this means a loss of intellectual property for Canadian companies and job losses for Canadian creators and actors. Abdicating our ability to create, produce, develop, and disseminate our cultural content to foreign interests is like allowing foreign companies to come in and farm 58% of our agricultural land according to their own standards and control the marketing of grains, fruits, and vegetables while selling them back to us at a profit. And what's more, we would say thank you for the jobs created. This is what Bill C-11 does by giving the CRTC the tools it needs to regulate all the players who choose to do business in Canada. Online broadcasting services occupy an ever-growing space in the broadcasting ecosystem. In Quebec, 70% of French-speaking adults subscribe to at least one video-on-demand service, with Netflix taking the top spot. In the Francophone market, among 18 to 34-year-olds, viewing of online on-demand content has overtaken traditional television. Among 18 to 24-year-olds, YouTube viewing accounts for nearly 8 hours per week, while TikTok is now one of the most popular platforms for young people, growing by 55% in the last year. TikTok even became an official partner of the 2022 Cannes Film Festival and created a competition of short fiction films of less than 3 minutes for the festival, in which both experienced and emerging filmmakers participated. The situation was unimaginable only a year ago. Using social media to broadcast original and professional audiovisual content and thus reach audiences that are deserting traditional media is a phenomenon that will continue to grow. It is therefore essential that Bill C-11 allow the CRTC to include in its jurisdiction both subscription-based streaming companies such as Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and Illico, and social media companies such as YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. It is also important that companies that provide internet and cell phone services be included in the bill so that the CRTC can eventually determine how they might contribute to the creation and presentation of Canadian content. For the moment, these companies are totally excluded from the application of the law, even though they play an important role in the ecosystem, not only by allowing the broadcasting and distribution of content, but also by offering privileged access to certain broadcasting platforms. For example, TELUS subscribers get free access to EC2.TV Extra. Videotron subscribers have the same privilege for 3 months for Vrai and Club Illico platforms, while Bell and Media and Rogers offer access to Crave and Disney Plus, respectively. 30 seconds. The association is also proposing certain other amendments for the audiovisual sector that are the result of collaboration with the Coalition for the Diversity of Cultural Expressions, or with the Canadian Media Producers Association and the Canadian Alliance of Francophone Producers. I will send you my amendments later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Messier. And I'm going to go to BCE Inc. or Incorporated, whichever you want to be called, but I think Inc. sounds nicer. And so perhaps we can decide who's going to speak for you. But for 5 minutes, please.
Oui, merci. Madame la Présidente, honorables membres du comité, merci de nous entendre aujourd'hui.
Thank you very much. Bell is the biggest broadcaster in Canada. We have many different services in both French and English across the country. We support Bill C-11 and ask that it be adopted rapidly. We have been waiting for it a long time. The bill sets the rules between us and our foreign competitors. The bill must and can be improved. The bill doesn't take into consideration our own system. Of course, it is the discussions that have been happening with Bill C-10 as well, have dealt with important issues, but have also almost completely ignored what domestic broadcasters require to succeed. As it stands, Bill C-11 does not explicitly incentivize foreign content providers to work in partnership with Canadian broadcasters. This needs to change, and I'll explain why.
Have succeeded by running hugely popular US shows that appeals to Canadian audiences and attracts significant advertising and subscription revenues. In turn, these revenues are used to fund the creation, production, and showcasing of Canadian content. At Bell Canada alone, we spend $1 billion annually on Canadian productions, both our own and with independent producers. Part of this spend is for local, national, and international news that provides uniquely Canadian perspectives on events here and around the world. But let me be clear, everything we are able to achieve as Canadian broadcaster is directly related to the profits we make by accessing foreign content. Without it, we simply don't have a business. We have achieved that access through the regulatory regime that enables it. Jonathan?
Thanks, Corinne. So how did the regulatory regime enable it? Through bold regulatory decisions that were made over 50 years ago to harness the power of Hollywood for the greater good of Canada through creative regulatory measures that put Canadian broadcasters at the center of the broadcast ecosystem. License rules required partnerships between foreign and Canadian broadcasters, creating such success stories as Discovery Canada, a partnership between Bell Media and Discovery. Another example is simultaneous substitution rules ensured that broadcasters could monetize all the Canadian viewerships and generated revenues that could be funneled back into news and Canadian shows. These solutions were not always obvious. It took the vision and fortitude of your predecessors to bring our ecosystem to life. But let's be clear, today, these rules no longer work. Our access to popular US shows has become increasingly challenging and expensive. Foreign streamers are bidding up the cost of programming acquisition. But even more concerning is that major US studios have either cut out domestic broadcasters altogether or are about to do so. Disney Plus and Paramount Plus are already using their own streaming platforms to reach Canadians directly. Others, like HBO, have launched their own OTT platforms in the US and could still choose to do so in Canada. With the ability to go direct to Canadians on an OTT basis, we are starting to see these platforms refuse to sell us their content altogether. So why does this matter? It matters because it puts all we do, and by we, I mean all that Canadian broadcasters do, at risk. Canadian broadcasters produce Canadian news that quite simply is essential to our culture, to protecting our democracy, and to our national sovereignty. But let's not delude ourselves. The entire Canadian broadcasting ecosystem is funded by profits generated from foreign content. We cannot expect broadcasters to continue to produce and support Canadian content that we do without access to foreign content and partnering with foreign players. Now, we can ensure the central role of Canadian broadcasters by securing access to foreign content. We can also incentivize foreign streamers to partner with Canadian broadcasters, much like foreign linear services have done for decades. We believe Bill C-11 should explicitly enable
30
this.
seconds, please.
Thank you. That is why we are proposing two important amendments to sections 3 and 5 of the Act today. Finally, we wanted to let you know that we are supportive of both the CAB's and Unifor's proposed amendments. A copy of them, as well as our specific amendments to sections 3 and 5 of the Act, are attached in our submission we sent to the clerk. Thank you for the opportunity to present our views, and we look forward to answering your questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And now the next up is Black Screen Office. Ms. Jenkinson for 5 minutes, please. You're muted, Ms. Jenkinson. Can you please unmute? Thank you.
I'm worried that might happen. Okay, I'll start again.
Okay,
Good
I do it all the
afternoon.
time.
Good afternoon. My name is Joan Jenkinson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Black Screen Office. a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy association. Our mission is to make Canadians' screen industries equitable and free of anti-Black racism, and to empower Black Canadians working within the screen industries to thrive and share their stories. The BSO was founded in the fall of 2020 with the support of Telefilm Canada and the Canada Media Fund in response to the growing awareness by Canadians of the need to take action to fight anti-Black racism. By this fall, the BSO will have released 3 research studies, one on creating authentic and inclusive content, a second that will be Canada's very first race-based audience survey, and a third report, which is a comprehensive labor market study of Black professionals in the Canadian screen industries. We also support Black producers and creatives with content incubators, creating pipelines to decision-making roles in the sector, in attending international film festivals and markets, and we work with industry partners to fund Black content creators. Thank you for inviting the BSO to talk to you today about Bill C-11, the bill to amend the Broadcasting Act. The BSO supports the Racial Equity Media Collective's submission to this committee with proposed amendments to the bill. We agree with others about the need to ensure that all the players who work within the Canadian broadcasting system, who compete for Canadian audiences and who earn revenues from it, should also contribute to it. However, the bill could be improved with a few small consequential amendments. Canadians of all backgrounds have not had access to programming within the Canadian broadcasting system that authentically reflects the diversity of this country. The proposed amendments in C-11 will prioritize greater equity and inclusion. We welcome C-11's references to serving the needs and interests of racialized Canadians, but wherever the word racialized is used, we ask that it be replaced with Black and racialized. We request this amendment as recognition that there has historically been greater oppression of Black Canadians and greater barriers to inclusion than with other racialized Canadians. For example, in the 2019 Statistics Canada survey, 45% of Black Canadians expressed that they experienced discrimination in the past 5 years, compared to 27% from other visible minorities. This discrimination can play out in education, healthcare, employment, housing, and yes, the Canadian screen industries. There needs to be a targeted strategy to break down these systemic barriers and fight anti-Black racism. Lumping Black Canadians in with all other racialized Canadians risks policy and regulation being adopted that do not consider the specific needs and challenges of Black communities. I would also like to address comments that I've heard at this committee that underrepresented Canadians have access to unregulated platforms such as YouTube for content that reflects them. I would like to ask why Black Canadians should be limited to user-generated and short-form content found on YouTube and TikTok, and not have access to longer-form stories found in serialized dramas, sitcoms, and documentaries that reflect their lives, their experiences, and their interests. It is true that Black Canadians have access to content coming from the US and the UK that is created by Black screenwriters, directors, and producers, but that content does not reflect the Canadian Black experience. This is important. Canadian Black communities are incredibly more diverse than African American communities. We consist of communities in Nova Scotia and Southern Ontario that are older than Canada, newer communities made up of people from the Caribbean, and more recent communities from Africa. With limited exceptions, the many stories of these various communities are not being told. Why can't there be everyday Black Canadians and rom-coms, sitcoms, sci-fi series, kids shows, and documentaries? The Black Screen Office looks forward to the swift passage of Bill C-11 with the proposed amendments and the subsequent CRTC proceedings that will create a regulatory framework that will support the creation, delivery, and promotion of more Canadian programming that reflects the lives and experiences of Black Canadians. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I now go to the Canadian Media Producers Association for 5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Reynolds Maston, and I'm the President and CEO of the Canadian Media Producers Association. The CMPA represents more than 600 companies across Canada engaged in the production of Canadian programming. With me today is Catherine Winder, a member of the CMPA board and the CEO of the Vancouver-based production company Wind, Sun, Sky Entertainment. Catherine has built a prolific career as a multi-platform adapter of intellectual property, with such projects as Star Wars, Angry Birds, and Invincible, to name a few. Thank you for inviting us to appear today. The CMPA supports the passage of Bill C-11. The modernization of our broadcasting regulatory framework is critical to maintaining our national sovereignty, promoting a diversity of voices in our system, and serving Canadian audiences.
For your consideration, we are proposing 3 amendments to the bill. The first amendment would help ensure that Canadians own Canadian stories, and that means Canadian ownership of intellectual property and of all the rights that make up ownership of a Canadian show. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening today. When a foreign web giant commissions a show from a Canadian producer, while on paper the producer gets to keep the copyright, the deals are structured such that the rights and the financial upside are expected to be given up. The result is most, if not all, of the show's revenue is vacuumed up by Hollywood for the life of the property. An updating Broadcast Act would ensure that Canadians share in the success of their own IP. In assessing the definition of a Canadian program, the bill should instruct the CRTC to consider the extent to which Canadians effectively own the full range of intellectual property in that program. In support of this objective, the CRTC would then assess the extent to which online streamers and broadcasters are collaborating with independent Canadian producers. When Canadian producers own the rights in their own IP, they reinvest the revenues that flow from that ownership into hiring more Canadian talent and developing the next great Canadian show. Owning our own IP also means that Canadians are in the driver's seat when it comes to who, where, and how our stories are told. Quite simply, ownership of Canadian IP by Canadians is an assertion of our national sovereignty. Our second amendment is about ensuring a healthy balance in our broadcasting system by requiring fair negotiations between buyers and sellers of content. The buyer side of our system is currently concentrated in the hands of the foreign web giants, as well as Canada's vertically integrated telecom companies. These buyers hold an outsized advantage in the negotiations with Canadian producers. The reason for this is simple. They are among the biggest companies in Canada, and in some cases, the planet, while Canadian producers are overwhelmingly small and medium-sized companies. With the deck stacked against them, most producers are forced to agree to a take-it-or-leave-it upfront payment. This means that with little leverage to negotiate meaningful ownership for the bucket of rights associated with their IP, producers risk not getting their shows made at all.
Change is needed to correct this market imbalance. The bill should ensure that the CRTC is empowered to require and enforce collective terms of trade between these buyers and independent Canadian producers. Terms of trade would provide a code of baseline conditions to be used in good faith negotiations between the parties when licensing a program. And this is not a novel solution. In 2003, the UK adopted terms of trade in its own Communications Act. Less than a decade later, the value of the UK independent production sector had almost tripled. In fact, this tool has been so successful that the UK government recently announced that it would maintain and modernize terms of trade. Given its success not only in the UK, but also in France and Germany, we are confident that the adoption of a terms of trade amendment in Bill C-11 would result in similar success here in Canada. Our third and final amendment would close a legislative loophole that generally excludes telecom service providers from the application of the Broadcasting Act. This exclusion no longer makes sense at a time when ISP and wireless services are playing an ever greater role in our broadcasting system. Today, Canadians watch content through their phones, tablets, laptops, and yes, also in their living rooms on TVs. But those televisions increasingly stream programs over the internet. The CRTC should have the ability to determine whether and how telecom providers could contribute to the creation of Canadian programming, and the policy direction should instruct the CRTC to do this in a way that protects consumers and upholds the principle that those who benefit from our system should contribute to it. In closing, we applaud the government for the introduction of Bill C-11 and look forward to responding to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I now go to Marla Bultman, Executive Director of Friends. Ms. Bultman?
Thank you. I'm going to switch to good evening now, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. Excuse me. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you in advance of this bill's arrival at committee, but for those I have not, my name is again Marla Bultman, and I am the new Executive Director of Friends. We have over 360,000 supporters, Canadian citizens from coast to coast to coast, who stand up proudly for Canadian culture in film and TV, in music, in journalism, really in every space and place we can share our stories at home and abroad. While I am new to the organization, I bring with me both a content production and entertainment law background, which for more than 20 years I have used to help advance the interest of those working in the Canadian cultural industries. The last time my organization appeared before you to talk about Bill C-10, our name was Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. Today, we are more simply called Friends. This is quite fitting because I'm not just here to talk about broadcasting. I'm also here as a friend of Canadian storytelling and Canadian cultural sovereignty, both of which will be affected by the work of this committee when this bill is adopted. I say when because I want to clearly and unequivocally state that while not perfect, we support the adoption of Bill C-11 and believe it can be improved with some minor amendments. One of the bill's imperfections lies in its silence when it comes to addressing the CBC's mandate. We are very disappointed by this, but a conversation about the modernization of our nation's public broadcaster clearly requires more singular attention, something that the government has committed to doing via Bill C-18 and which we welcome. In the meantime, I don't want to use these few minutes to give those who would like to see this legislation stalled any more reasons to pause, to prevaricate, to do nothing. Because if we do nothing, how our stories are told, who gets to tell them, and how Canadian audiences access these stories will all be decisions made by foreign tech giants, billion-dollar companies who have effectively been crashing on our cultural couch for almost a decade, paying nothing towards the structures and systems that allow Canadians to tell their own stories. With the adoption of Bill C-11, we as a country will finally send a long overdue notice to these foreign tech giants that their rent is due. But we cannot stop there. Bill C-11 must prioritize Canadian ownership and control of our broadcasting system, as well as the content created to serve it. If it does not, these companies will not be paying us fair rent for the use of our home. Rather, their contributions may simply amount to a down payment on a broadcasting system which they could potentially own and control. Our proposed amendment to Section 31A, jointly submitted with the Coalition for the Diversity of Cultural Expressions, is meant to address this ownership and control issue. As currently drafted, the language in Section 31A is a massive retreat of Canadian public policy. If we don't support our own media and preference over foreign media, then we are ultimately relegating ourselves to having no Canadian media at all. We need only look to the decimation of the Canadian local news sector for a preview of what is to come if we do not take care of our media institutions. Which is why support for Friends Amendment to Section 11.11, dealing with expenditure requirements, can lay the foundation for a stronger, more viable local broadcast news sector. It would help ensure that the cuts we've seen to local print outlets across Canada do not start coming to local radio and TV, and that broadcasters have the resources to maintain quality local coverage. In closing, I would like to remind this committee that the modernization of the Broadcasting Act isn't just about protecting an industry and jobs. It's what Canadians want. Canadians who have sent a clear message to Ottawa that streaming platforms should contribute to Canadian storytelling and reflect our stories back to us. They think this is fair, and we agree. Thank you for your time and consideration on this incredibly important matter, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bultman. And finally, we go to John Lawford from the Public Interest Advocacy Centre. Mr. Lawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Public Interest Advocacy Centre defines the consumer interest in broadcasting as ensuring that consumers benefit from access to a wide variety of programming in the broadcasting system that offers choice in an affordable manner. Unlike in 1991, consumers now pay for almost all broadcasting, whether with money or with personal information, including their online subscriptions, cable TV and video on demand, delivered by a BDU or over the top via the internet. Consumers are now a key stakeholder in this debate. We are of equal importance to creators, platforms, and producers. We believe extending CanCon financial support requirements to online services such as Netflix or Amazon Prime, and even social media platforms such as YouTube and Facebook, when used as program distributors, is generally supported by Canadians. However, the bill grants the CRTC discretion to set the financial and potential other obligations of online undertaking registrants, no matter their size or type, provided they distribute any programs, which is overbroad. To solve this, we support an amendment to the bill exempting small online undertakings below a high Canadian revenues threshold, perhaps $150 million, from financial and other conditions. This threshold would not affect registration or information requirements. Consumers naturally resist the insertion of CanCon into automated plays or algorithmic suggestions of platforms such as YouTube, and digital-first creators are concerned that such discoverability tools will backfire and reduce their audiences. PIAC believes the user-generated content problem can be addressed by redefining discoverability as not one concept, but two: static and dynamic discoverability. Bill C-11's only new mandatory broadcasting policy requirement is Section 3.1R, which states online undertakings shall clearly promote and recommend Canadian programming in both official languages as well as in Indigenous languages, and ensure that any means of control of the programming generates results, allowing its discovery. Clearly, discoverability is key to the drafters and must stay in some form. This policy objective mandates both static and dynamic discoverability. The first half could be satisfied by a banner ad on YouTube that simply links upon a consumer's click to a selected CanCon. It is static. It is unobtrusive and likely unobjectionable to consumers, but still clearly promotes and recommends CanCon. The second half of the new policy objective is dynamic. It requires AI prediction tools to insert a CanCon video or song into a user's autoplay feature, or to dynamically suggest links. It is intrusive and disruptive to the user's expectations and experience. It is overkill to achieve the goal of promote and recommend CanCon. It is even more intrusive than the exhibition requirements on traditional broadcasters, because the online world is a world of abundance and consumer choice, not scarcity, where mandated exhibition makes more sense. Digital-first creators are rightly concerned that the bill's requirement to use dynamic discoverability will backfire and actually demote the importance of and user engagement with their content, as Canadian users who are involuntarily exposed to discoverability links will avoid or react negatively, thereby signaling to the AI globally and in Canada to demote the content. The solution is to require only static discoverability tools and to require any Canadian content creator who wishes to have their content promoted, even by static discoverability, to apply to a new CanCon authorization authority, likely the CRTC. This will allow digital-first creators the choice to continue to operate untouched by this entire regime, which PIAC believes they want, or to have their content promoted in the limited sense of static discoverability. PIAC therefore recommends amending Section 3.1R to remove the last 15 words, thereby directing the CRTC to satisfy the bill's discoverability requirement with only static discoverability tools. I welcome your questions, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawford. And now we're going to go to the question and answer segment. The first segment begins with a 6-minute question and answer for each one of the parties on this committee. The 6 minutes includes question and answer, so everyone please try to be succinct so I don't have to cut you off. But this allows you to expand on some of the things you may not have been allowed to say in your opening remarks. And so we will begin with the Conservative Party for 6 minutes. Mr. Waugh, Kevin, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Disclosure to BCE, as I was an employee of your company for nearly 40 years. So I'm going to start with you, and I find it astonishing that you've for 30 plus years made millions of dollars off U.S. productions, and you can sit and tell us in committee that others now are holding back the U.S. production, and now you're on the outside. Live with Kelly and Ryan, The View, Dr. Phil, Big Bang Theory, Ellen, American Ninja Warrior, Weakest Link, The Daily Show, Late Show, Young Shelton, NFL football. What do you pay today for American programming that is played in your stations across Canada on CTV? That would be to
Please
Mr. Daniels
respond.
or Ms. Moses.
Yep. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll give it over to Corinne to give you the answers in terms of your question about what do we pay today. We pay a lot of money for American programming. We're not denying that. And you say that it's kind of surprising in the sense of, but that's the business model. The business model is that we pay a lot for American programming, and then we take that and we have requirements, regulatory requirements, to put it into Canadian content, including news. So I think when you look at what we do, it is all about the collection of the two together. We are able to monetize our American content by partnering with them, and in a way that's profitable both for us and Americans, the content owners. But now they're seeing an opportunity to cut us out, and not just us. I'm talking all Canadian broadcasters, and therefore the kind of things that you can associate us producing, including Canadian programs, which you didn't list off, but I can ask Corinne too, all of our examples of that. To see all of those examples and look at all of that and say, are we going to continue to produce that? And especially news. Who's going to produce the news if we don't have a model that ensures that Canadian broadcasters are still have a role to play? Corinne?
No, that's a good point, because last year, TSN Radio, you flipped the switch on 3 markets, eliminated it in seconds, and then you went to comedy channels. You've done this across from Vancouver on. You hold several radio properties, which is under C11. And I think disrespectful to the listeners of the TSN radio, which you do own in the Vancouver markets and so on. Hamilton, you just cut overnight and just flipped the switch on the comedy channels without any input from the CRTC on licensing. It was just done. Jobs were lost and people were escorted out of the business. So this is what we're seeing. So yes, I'm going to give you kudos on Canadian news. You've overexceeded on most markets your obligation. You have morning, noon, 5 to 7, and late night in many markets. So I will give you kudos. You've overexceeded the hours required by the CRTC for news coverage. But at the same time, and you can talk about the Canadian production, I see very little Canadian production between 7 and 10, prime time. I do see Big Bang Theory. I do see Big Bang Theory over and over and over on nights, 3 and 4 times. So can we see any Canadian productions on the 7 to 10 to promote Canadian culture so that maybe you don't have to go to LA and buy those foreign competition shows that now you're being up against on the big foreign people that you've just talked about? Is there any hope that you can rival from 7 to 10 some Canadian programming that people can see other than the NHL?
Yeah, there is definitely hope. As we mentioned, we are investing $1 billion every year in Canadian content. And as we speak, we have more than 150 projects underway with 75 independent producers here in Canada to develop projects that are Canadian projects. And if we look at our primetime schedule, and I don't think the debate should be around timing on the grid, but more about what does Canadian want to watch and when and on which platform. So that's what we're pushing. So you refer to a lot of titles that are American shows, but we do have a lot of Canadian shows. Children Ruins Everything, Drag Race Canada, we have Transplant, Cardinal. We have tons of shows in Quebec that are produced by our Quebec producer. 95% of our programming grid in Quebec is Canadian content. And in Canada, English Canada, this is growing. So this is one of our strategic imperatives to develop Canadian content more and more. So yes, we are invested in Canadian content.
How's Crave doing? Because when I was at Bell, and a streaming service like Netflix was started, Bell thought at the time, don't worry, they're just streamers, they're not going to affect us. And then you started Crave, and then you closed Crave, then you brought Crave back. So how are you doing with Crave? If you're going to talk about
30 seconds,
the new
Kevin?
media, which is streaming, have you put any money into Crave and Canadian shows in Crave? And if so, how much have you put into Crave?
We have many Canadian shows on Crave, and we never close Crave. Crave was launched many years ago, and it was always there. And in fact, we grow Crave because we included French Canadian content in Crave. We have more than 6,000 hours of French Canadian content in Crave. It's a success story for Canadian. It's the only Canadian streaming service that provides content in both languages across the country.
Thank you, Ms. Moses. Thank you very much. And now I go to the Liberal Party, Michael Coteau, for 6 minutes, please, Michael. Michael?
Can you hear me okay?
6 minutes, please. No, we can't hear you at all.
Okay, hold on.
No, now we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much to all the witnesses for joining us. This conversation has been it's been a very fascinating conversation, and for me, C11 is about fairness, equality, inclusiveness, openness, and respect. And I think maintaining our Canadian culture through film and television is something that we as Canadians, as lawmakers, as citizens, should be striving to do. Miss Boltman from Friends, I think the best line I've heard this evening was "crashing on our cultural couch." So thank you for sharing that, and I'll keep that in the back of my mind as we proceed. And so my question, I just wanted to talk to just ask a few questions to Mrs. Jenkinson from BSO. We had a meeting earlier this week, and we heard from some witnesses how government should not be involved in the regulation of any type of broadcasting. In particular, we heard from one witness that some online streaming giants that didn't want to carry such unique voices like OutTV was just capitalism at work, and that it was fine, and that the government should not be ensuring diversity in those voices. So I just want to get your opinion on that, because I am I think completely opposite to that. I think as in a democratic process, we should use democracy and the ability for government through law and regulation and directives to ensure that we have good Canadian content that reflects Canada today. So I just wanted to get your opinion on that statement from a witness earlier this week.
Please unmute Ms. Jenkinson.
Yes.
Thank you.
We completely, agree that there should be room in the spectrum of content to certainly allow for content from channels like OutTV. We think that traditionally underrepresented creators are finding audiences on YouTube, and the argument is that it doesn't need to be regulated because it's satisfying the diversity that we need in the industry. But what we've seen is, first of all, that there's a small percentage of creators who are able to generate enough audiences to make even $10,000 a year from YouTube. And that the kind of programming that we see are, music, comedy, DIY shows, and short snippets, but that should not be the only source for diverse content. People want to see shows that are scripted storytelling. They want to lean back on the couch and watch crime dramas and love stories and see themselves in it. And I think this is what all audiences want. They want choice. And there certainly are great choices on the digital first platforms, but that doesn't negate the fact that we need these other platforms that are regulated, and we think that all should be regulated so that we can have the kind of content that our Canadian audiences are looking for.
My colleagues on this committee, some of them, particularly the Conservatives, have suggested that we just leave it up to the algorithm. We've heard from witnesses saying that capitalism will ensure diversity of voices. But what's been the experience for Black Canadians when it comes to film and television and working with these online giants? What has been historically the relationship like and the impact on Black Canadians?
I can say that the content that we see of Black people comes from the United States generally. In the history of Canadian television, there have only been, prior to 2020, 4 TV drama series that have been made by and about Black communities. And when it comes to feature films, it's taken between 9 and 13 years to make a feature film, from a first to a second feature film. So there has been very, very little on traditional platforms. And with the emergence of the new platforms, we're seeing user-generated content, which is great, and it's providing opportunities for underrepresented groups to have a voice, and for emerging talent to have an opportunity to grow their talent. But again, what we want to see is choice. We want to be able to ensure that Black content creators have access to the bigger budgets to make dramas and comedies and documentaries that a large percentage of the population want to see. So.
And do you really believe that, like, from what
40
you
seconds,
said,
Michael?
Thank you. You believe that this bill will help ensure that going forward, if we put in the right type of legislation, with those, and I did hear you say that you have some suggestions on some amendments, but the spirit overall of C11, from your perspective, would be a good thing for Canadians in general.
I think it would be great for Canadians, and particularly underrepresented groups, because equity and inclusion are at the core of the bill.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. And now I go to the Bloc Québécois. Martin Champeau, for 6 minutes, please, Martin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. Mrs. Messier, I'll start with you. I know that you have followed very attentively the exchanges we've had on Bill C11 since the very beginning. It's something that is very important to us, and you've also been following since Bill C10. I'd like to know what you think of how things are going right now. That's a pretty general question. I think the thing that has hit me the most is the lack of understanding on the scope of this bill, especially with regards to social media. I think yesterday's meeting with the CRTC cleared things up, but I think that this conversation on Canadian content, well, there's not much consideration for intellectual property and for independent producers, and I think that's what has struck me the most. That what big studios and platforms have come to tell us is that they want the status quo. They want more American content in Canada, and they want that to be Canadian expenses. I think that this would have a disastrous impact on the system, and it's been going on for 40 years. Well, you spoke about the investments of Canadian companies, especially in film production. It's an excellent point. We talked about Disney this week. We talked about Mr. Lewis, for example, who spoke of the contributions that you also spoke of, which they say these contributions are more than enough. What tools can we use to make sure that the money invested by these companies in Canadian and Quebec productions are indeed profitable for the entire industry and not just for the big companies? Well, what they're telling us is that when they shoot X-Men in Montreal, that this is Canadian content, that if we have a factory, an automobile factory in Bromont, then this is suddenly a Canadian car. which is ridiculous. We have to hire creative resources here in Canada as much as possible, and keep intellectual property at the heart of the definition. The issue is not. The issue is the nature of the contribution we're asking for. In France, we ask them to put 20% of their revenue in content creation, and so we have to do that with independent creators as well. If we have to do that for traditional broadcasters and have them work with independent producers. And we also have to recognize other types of contributions. For example, Netflix contributing in Canadian development. For me, it's more a question of how do we evaluate this kind of contribution and not so much adapting ourselves to the idea of Canadian content, which really just serves to keep the status quo. I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about social media, because I know that you, or maybe circumvent that, but you want social media to be included, but also telephone and internet providers to be included. Are you looking for a fight? Well, I'm trying to have something equitable, and I know that the law is only changing once every 30 years, and we do have this system. We talked about it yesterday with the CMPA. We listen to the content and we consume the content on the internet, so I think it's normal to consider their contributions. Distributors contribute to about 5% of the revenue, and I think we can increase that, and I think that it could be more equitable for consumers. I think we need to consider that we can spread out some of that revenue. I think 2/3 of Canadians have access to cable, for example, so we could reduce the contribution to maybe 2 or 3% by expanding the base and not penalizing the consumers. And also, when you sign up to internet, it's not just for audiovisual content. So we can also exempt revenue from basic fees. It's not really necessarily to listen to content, but if you have an unlimited amount of data, then you can definitely you'll listen to more and consume more content online. So I think we should maybe consider including telecommunications in this bill. So briefly, the article or the section 3(1)(f), 40 seconds, it wants to make sure that there's no way for online companies to circumvent the law. How important do you think this is? I think it is very important because right now we have a 2-tier system, one for Canadian companies and one for foreign companies. What we're saying is that if you're making Canadian content, whether you're a local or foreign company, but when it's really when it's Canadian content, not just made in content, but Canadian content, then we should have the same requirements. That's what we're supposing. That's what we're proposing. Thank you.
Martin, and I now go to the New Democratic Party. Peter Julian. Peter, 6 minutes. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. You have many valuable things to contribute today, so I'm going to try to go through as many witnesses as possible. I will start with you, Mrs. Messier. You submitted some amendments or possible amendments that touch upon the content creation, Canadian content creation, and obligations for broadcasting companies to do so, but also for some agreements, commercial agreements, and to respect collective trade agreements. Can you talk to us about the importance of these two amendments that you're proposing? Essentially, with regards to the trade agreements, the negotiating power is very difficult for traditional broadcasters and Mrs. Winder spoke about it a little bit earlier. Often producers have to let go of their rights when they are negotiating with these big broadcasters. And so they can't take advantage of the revenue. And we also know that independent producers are the ones who develop talent and invest in training new directors who will, for example, who will then in turn work with others to develop all that Canadian talent. So we want to just retain some control and use some of our rights. In France, for example, the agreement they have with these platforms, they have an exclusivity that can be given to the platforms up to 36 months for a certain amount of time in television and cinema, but then the producer can gain their rights again and retain their catalog. And that's why collective negotiation is important, because it's difficult with one producer alone. And that's why we do it with the associations. Thank you very much.
Ms. Winder from the Canadian Media Producers Association, you've put a lot of an accent on intellectual property. And so my questions to you are, why is intellectual property so important for independent producers? And why is it important that the CRTC has the power to really have a framework around economic relations between broadcasters and independent producers?
Well, terms of trade help fairly rebalance the negotiating power or level the playing field, given that the streamers and broadcasters have tremendous negotiating power. It also helps Canadian companies own their own content, which drives growth, as Madame Messier has mentioned. The terms of trade and the funding from the streamers will enable producers to invest in new Canadian content, which is critical. And let's talk about kids' content for a moment. Our kids are Canadians' future audience members. While Canadians used to be global leaders in the field of kid entertainment, thanks to the broadcasters' obligations to Canadian content and children's programming, today there are few buyers remaining in Canada and far less opportunities for producers to produce this content than in the past. This reality, combined with the climbing cost to produce, we as producers have no choice but to leave the country to get this type of content financed. And in doing so, producers no longer have the leverage they once had when they were able to bring Canadian distributors and broadcaster financing to the table up front when doing deals. The result is we really need terms of trade to help us ensure that we aren't forced to give away these long-term valuable Canadian assets. And a perfect example of this is Paw Patrol. Canadian Heritage and the Globe and Mail stat came out a couple of weeks ago that said that in 2019, Paw Patrol was responsible for 33% of the country's GDP. So as you can see, it's tremendously valuable that we keep these assets.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Ms. Jenkinson. Ms. Jenkinson, we've heard testimony at this committee about OutTV that was basically excluded from a number of online streaming companies. You've mentioned the issue of the unregulated online platforms. Is it your opinion that Black and racialized Canadians may be excluded from online platforms in the same way that we've seen without TV?
We don't believe that they'll be excluded from online platforms in the same way, certainly. What we are saying, though, again, is that we want to ensure that there's funding in the system for content that is beyond user-generated content, that we have the choice in the broadcast system to have higher budget content that Black content creators can make.
You've mentioned the fact that unregulated online platforms may not provide the same space. Did I misunderstand your testimony?
Well, we're saying that that we don't think that we should rely solely on online platforms to give us the diversity in the system where underrepresented groups would have to be relegated to find their content. That diversity in the system is not satisfied solely by user-generated content, that we also want to ensure that there's money in the system to make content that are, dramas and comedies and documentaries that large numbers of people want to see. And we want to ensure that there's funding in the system for Black content creators to make that content. So again, it's a matter of choice. It's not to say that we wouldn't be in either place, but that we need both.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkinson. Thank you, Peter. And we're now moving into a 5-minute round. And to begin with, for 5 minutes, we will begin with the Conservatives. Ms. Thomas, please, for 5 minutes.
JJ, my questions are for you. There have been many witnesses that have come to this table, many here today with us, who believe that we should we can classify them as traditional artists, I believe. And they believe that we should rush this bill through the House of Commons. Now, I think it's important that we note that most of the witnesses and stakeholders who are in favor of this legislation would benefit financially if it passed. There's money that goes into something called the Art Fund. Those that contribute to it do so at a tune of 30% of their revenue. Of course, traditional artists can pull from that fund. However, digital artists cannot. So traditional artists have everything to gain. Digital artists have a lot to lose. Do you agree with this observation? And if so, can you comment on the damage that this might cause to those that are digital-first creators?
Yeah, no, that's a good observation. I must sort of say that listening to the other witnesses and hearing their testimony, it really makes me kind of wish that we could just erect this big wall between old media and new media. Because I, as a new media creator, do not want to live in the world of old media. There's so much regulation, and these people, they've got all these financing issues, and they want these subsidies, and then they opt into these, sort of funding pools like you're alluding to, and then they've got all these requirements for CanCon that they have to navigate. It just seems like such a stressful, painful, difficult world, no offense to anyone. Whereas in the new world, in the new media world, which is much more dynamic, we're all independent, we're self-employed, we don't deal with government, we don't have to have huge teams of lawyers to navigate all of these media regulations. If we feel like working with Americans, we just do, and we don't have a big existential crisis about it. And we've been very successful. As I said, what did I prattle off? How many, there's over 100 Canadian YouTubers with 3.5 million subscribers and over 1 billion video views. Initially, I wanted that stat to be how many YouTubers are there with over 1 million subscribers. But the fact is that list is so long that, Social Blade doesn't let you read it all. So, and we've been successful. So many of these self-employed, independent YouTubers in Canada have had tremendously successful careers as content creators, telling the stories that they want to tell, thriving and succeeding and becoming some of the biggest celebrities in the world. I talk to, I sometimes give speeches at elementary schools and stuff because all the kids want to see a YouTuber. They want to see what it's like, and they all dream of that being their career. They want to be YouTubers as well. And I say to them, and I say to their parents, it's a completely viable career path because all it takes to be a successful Canadian YouTuber is to just, have the drive, have the initiative, have the self-discipline. I don't have to live in the world that these other folks do, where it's all about regulations and navigating regulations and opting into funding and all of this kind of stuff. We get our money from our advertisers. It's based on our ability to produce content that the masses want to watch. Not only Canadians, but a global audience. No Canadian YouTuber is successful just by appealing to Canadians. They're successful because they appeal to a global audience. That is the way that media works in the 21st century. I make videos about Canadian stuff. I make videos about Canadian history and Wilfrid Laurier and politics and all these sorts of things. International audiences eat this stuff up. They love it. They love to learn about Canada. They all, I meet people on the street who say that they've moved to Canada because of my videos, right? It's remarkable. And I just think that there needs to be a little bit more appreciation for how dynamic and how exciting and how entrepreneurial and how prosperous this world of new media content creation is in this country. And that this committee and that the House of Commons not rush through a bill that could possibly, inflict great damage on this dynamic, vibrant chunk of not only of the Canadian economy, but of the Canadian cultural industry in particular. So, if we want to continue to sort of regulate the old media and deal with that, that's fine. But just leave us out of it. That's my statement to this committee.
Very quickly, you're saying that Canadians are very successful in being able to reach a global audience. Obviously, they depend on that. What will Bill C-11 do to that ability?
Well, it seems to me that the agenda here is to try to make like Canadian content creators produce a certain kind of content for Canadian domestic consumption entirely. Like if I understand kind of the agenda that's sort of being articulated here, it's that the goal of the government, the goal of the Parliament is to create sort of mandates for Canadian creators like myself to make more explicitly Canadian content for a Canadian audience exclusively, right? Which is the sort of the reigning, consensus that dictates our existing CanCon regime when it comes to Canadian television and Canadian radio and all of that kind of thing. The idea is that the government sort of has to set down an explicit sort of set of identifiers of what Canadian content is, and those identifiers are being done ostensibly for the benefit of a narrow Canadian audience that is determined to benefit from capital C CanCon. And in my world, we make content with a global audience in mind. Canadians are part of the globe, so Canadians are certainly part of that consumer base, but they're not exclusively the only people that we're targeting. And so I think that if you create a new sort of regulatory system, you're essentially sort of boxing in new media creators and sort of saying like, we know you had global ambitions, but now we want you to dramatically narrow your ambitions, only target it to Canadians, sort of exist in this kind of like rarefied walled garden, only appeal to other Canadians, which will dramatically sort of shrink your revenue and will shrink your appeal, and frankly will shrink the influence of Canadian cultural creators globally, right? I think it is a good thing that Canadian content creators in the new media space are able to appeal to a global audience because, as I said, my own life is a case study of this. I have introduced the world to Canada. I have made many, many foreign people interested in Canada, interested in Canadian affairs, as I said, even to the point where they've wanted to move here. So I think that we have to be very sensitive to the idea that we live in a globalized world now. New media offers unprecedented global reach. And so we need to, I think, at least when it comes to new media, we need to get away from this idea that Canadian content creators only exist for the benefit of Canadians. We exist for the benefit of the world.
Thank you very much. I think your time is up. And I now move to, for the Liberals, for 5 minutes, Mr. Biddle. Chris?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And it's interesting we hear about it being a viable industry when we heard testimony earlier in the week that 75% of eligible YouTubers make $0, and of the remaining 25%, 60% of those make less than $10,000. But Madam Chair, Ms. Thomas is interrupting me. I know she was quite upset about it last week, but I'm about to ask witness a question. I'm hoping my time could be restarted, Madam Chair.
All right, I shall stop this a minute to start again. Please, it would be nice if we respected each other when we had our time to question witnesses. So, Mr. Biddle, please continue. You have the floor.
Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank Ms. Thomas for her sudden interest. I know she's been talking through most of the witnesses, but it's nice she's paying attention right now. I guess I will go to the CMPA. I was wondering if you could speak to the presence of traditional artists on digital platforms. We're hearing about this wall and these two worlds, but I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Well, this has been a very interesting dialogue so far, and I think it gives all of us opportunities to correct misapprehensions across the divide. So I just want to point out, first of all, that Canadian producers have always been globally focused. And the reason for that is the production of professional content costs a lot of money. It employs a lot of highly skilled people, and they are well paid to contribute to Canadian programming. And as a result, in order to raise the budget for those shows, it's necessary, and it always has been necessary, to go into the international marketplace and find partners. And usually what that results in is the show being broadcast and distributed in all kinds of markets around the world. And I could give you a very long list of Canadian shows that are broadcast and have incredible audience numbers in literally hundreds of markets around the world. So it's never been the case that the so-called traditional Canadian production or media industry has only been Canada focused, even though, of course, we are very proud to serve Canadian audiences, to be rooted in this country, and to employ the tens of thousands of creators and creative workers that we do.
Thank you so much. We heard from Jerome Payette last week that streaming and social media platforms aren't neutral. They choose winners and losers. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
So Mr. Payette is a member of the Coalition for the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. And unlike Mr. Payette, the CMPA and our members, because overwhelmingly our business is conducted with Canadian broadcasters and streaming platforms, we don't have the same level of expertise as Mr. Payette or the Coalition does on how social media platforms operate their businesses or how best they should be regulated. But certainly the Coalition does have that deep expertise. We are a member of that Coalition and we take guidance from them and support their submissions in this regard.
How do we ensure that we aren't a branch plant for cultural economy, rip it and ship it based economy that Canadians benefit but industry retains its value?
Can I jump in here, Reynolds?
Absolutely.
That's back to IP ownership and ensuring that Canadians retain the IP that they've invested in, that tells Canadian stories and global stories. I want to point out that everything that we do as a company here is globally focused. We build global audiences and produce massive global brands. But I'd like to tell you a story kind of to the point of the potential of becoming more of a factory per se. Recently we had a streamer make an offer for one of our properties. The deal was typical of those offered at the streamers and major studios today, whereby we had to give up all of our global distribution rights, our format rights, and essentially full creative control to get our show made. In return, we were offered a relatively small participation and a decent production service fee. While we invested heavily in the development of the project and we're bringing some of the show's financing to the table through our tax credits, the studio did not recognize these financial contributions as warranting the retention of any meaningful share of our rights. The challenge we faced, as do many independent producers, is that our potential U.S. partners had taken the position that the government incentives are not for the benefit of building the Canadian industry, but rather to help finance their content libraries. Given that most producers do not have the resources to push back, precedents have been set where this has become the norm, and we have little or no leverage. Based on the proposed structure, okay.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I now go to the Bloc Québécois, Martin Champeau, for 2.5 minutes. Martin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to speak to Mrs. Moses. From Bell, we talked about your activities in the television sector, but you also have many radio stations, especially in Quebec. There was a survey recently done by the folks at ADISC, and they reported that 90% of people who answered in Quebec, and there were 83, and more than 4,000 people responded. 90% of them want to protect Quebec culture. They want to highlight Quebec music. 70% of them like that there is Quebec music suggested. And they want the big companies to also highlight Quebec and Francophone music. So Bell has to work with the CRTC's quotas and requirements for French Francophone music. What do you think of the efficiency of that measure, and do you think that the effect would be as beneficial if we applied that measure to digital platforms? Indeed, I think, of course, we are all, for the promotion of Quebec content, especially myself, because I am from Quebec. Of course, we do invest as much in video and audio content. For the quotas, the idea is to give people what they want. So if people want to listen to Quebec music, that's what we'll give them. If they want to watch TV, Quebec TV, that's what we'll give them. In the end, we have at least 40 seconds left. We started, myself, Mr. Julian, and I started our clocks at the same time. We have at least 30, 40 seconds before the interruption, Madam Chair. So I would like to ask another question to Mrs. Moses, please. Should I continue?
Exactly when I told you had 2.5.
I understand, but I'm challenging that.
Go ahead.
D'accord, merci.
So, Mrs. Moses, you say that we have to offer people what they want, but isn't that against the principle of helping people or of letting people discover what they want? We can't just give them what they already know. Are you not in agreement that the discoverability means that people can go for what they want? And that's why I'm saying that diversity of offer is very important. That's why we have an interesting industry and makes it so interesting. Of course, discoverability works on all platforms, so indeed that is our goal. If we don't have a diversity of content, that no matter what it is, then it's just no stories and it's just a cycle. But of course, the more we have content, the more we can invest in our own content. My time is up. Thank you.
Much. I now go to Mr. Julian for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to go to Ms. Boltman now. Ms. Boltman, the Friends brief talks about the tens of thousands of jobs lost over the last few years and cites that Google and Facebook made $7.5 billion in Canada from digital ads in 2019. Is this why Friends is pressing the committee to adopt C11, that what we're seeing, in addition to it being an uneven playing field, is that we're essentially hovering money out of the country, and some of it should come back to actually create Canadian productions and provide for that ability of Canadians to tell stories, both to themselves and to the world.
If I may, well, I guess what you're asking, or what I'm going to say is, why does Bill C11 matter to us? And I would say that with the most, we share the longest international border with the most dominant power and most prolific producer of entertainment content in the world. And for better or for worse, American content has an incredible influence over our culture. But history has taught us time and time again that failure to protect and promote our culture and our identity is a recipe for foreign domination. So our ability to protect and promote Canadian culture and identity happens through our sharing of stories, be it film, television, journalism, music, whatever the audiovisual means. The survival of our stories have always rested on government support. And Bill C11 will allow us to maintain control over our culture and our stories by shoring up that support. So requiring contributions from foreign tech giants who extract billions of dollars from our country will help sustain our industry while driving investment and innovation in the creation of Canadian content that continues to reflect our diversity of voices and who we are as Canadians. Foreign contributions will level the playing field between Canadian broadcasters and foreign platforms. And frankly, it sends a message to the world that Canada is open for business, but there are no more free rides. If you benefit from the system, you must contribute to it.
A link between the loss of jobs in the industry and the fact that at the same time we've seen massive amounts of revenue leaving the country, essentially meaning that, as you note in your brief, that Canadian media has lost 50% of its ad revenues over the last from 2017 to 2019.
So I think in our brief, we're talking more about news. If you want to talk about jobs in the sort of cultural sector in general, I think there are other people, like the DGC spoke to this last week about the declining sector, and I think the CMPA can speak well to it too. I'm happy to speak about news, but I get the impression that you are trying to speak more about the cultural sector in general. But I'm happy to speak about the news sector if that's what you're asking.
I'm afraid you only have 1 second left. Thank you very much, Ms. Boltman, and we will move on now to Ms. Thomas for the Conservative Party for 5 minutes.
JJ, you wrote a column in the New York Times a little while ago in April, and in it you said, I quote, "An act of an authoritarian-minded government seeking greater control over independent media for purely ideological purposes in a globally unprecedented reimagining of the state's right to control online content, justified only by an imperious assertion that politicians and bureaucrats should decide what their citizenry needs to see. If passed, Bill C-11 will serve only to empower other regimes that believe the unrestricted freedom to choose what we watch and hear is a monster to be slain," end quote. Do you care to elaborate on this?
Yes, that's some good rhetoric on my part, isn't it? No, I mean, when we hear, it was in the Washington Post, just for the record, when we hear some of this rhetoric, I do think it disturbs some people. When we hear stuff about how we have to protect ourselves from foreign domination and we have to maintain our cultural sovereignty, the idea that, Canadian culture is this like fragile thing that like the evil foreigners are going to corrupt and sort of erode us. That to me is the kind of rhetoric you associate with like Viktor Orban's Hungary or something, right? And I don't think that a progressive democratic country like Canada wants to set the roadmap to regulating the internet that can then be adopted by the Viktor Orbans of the world. Because what's to prevent an authoritarian government from sort of saying like, well, we want to protect our cultural sovereignty too, and that's why we need to regulate YouTube and make sure that only good patriotic, content is seen, and we'll, play around with the algorithm to ensure that only the sort of patriotic content that we believe our people should see will get boosted in their feeds and their subscriber counts and all that kind of stuff. This is a real sort of old-fashioned way of thinking about Canada and thinking about Canadian culture that I personally do not have a lot of time for, and I think is increasingly just a very dated premise of thinking about culture that most YouTubers just do not conceptualize in the same way. Like, they don't think I'm making content in order to preserve some fragile idea of Canadian sovereignty. They think I'm making a cooking video, I'm making a fitness tutorial, I'm making a DIY video. I make videos that are about specifically Canadian stuff, but there's tons of Canadian YouTubers who have been successful by just making the kind of content that they think there's an audience for. Sometimes that audience is Canadian, sometimes that audience is international. But Canadians, I don't know, we're a very diverse people and we've got a lot of different interests. And I think that the great thing about YouTube and new media is that it allows Canadians to create the kind of content they want for a market that they believe exists. They sink or swim based on the popularity of that. And it's true what one of the other fellows said, which is that, there are a lot of failed Canadian YouTubers. There's a lot of failed Canadian actors. Nobody is guaranteed success in the cultural realm. But I just think that YouTube is a marvelous case study of how you can be an independent Canadian content creator and achieve, wealth and success and fame and all of the sorts of things that creatives want, without government regulation, without subsidies, without mandates and CanCon requirements and all of this kind of stuff. So what I'm sort of saying is that I do think that we need to kind of get away from this. Like, if old media wants to still live under that regime, that's fine. But to me, as a new media creator, when I hear about talk of like protecting our culture from foreign domination and how we need government sort of paternalistic hand to ensure that YouTube will be more patriotic and more Canadian and that consumers of YouTube will only watch the right sorts of videos, that kind of stuff gets my backup and gets the backup of a lot of Canadian content creators who don't want to be told what kind of content that they have to make.
JJ, what you're talking about is the desire under Bill C-11 that the government has to protect, quote, Canadian culture. Ultimately, what it means is that CanCon, anything that fits that definition, which is an antiquated definition to begin with, will be bumped up in the queue in terms of discoverability online, and other material that doesn't meet that antiquated definition will actually get bumped down and maybe even be on page like 553 of the internet where it'll never be discovered in its lifetime. What impact will this have on digital-first creators?
Yeah, so this is a very important point. So in the YouTube world, we have a term where we talk about getting buried, right? YouTube has its own algorithm, which is controversial in its own terms, like what makes a YouTube video easy to discover or not easy to discover. YouTube has their own sort of system of that. If government gets involved, if the CRTC gets involved and comes up with their own sort of metrics, then you've got this whole new stress to worry about. Like, is your video now not only getting sort of suppressed by YouTube's algorithm, but by some sort of new, content regime that the CRTC has imposed on YouTube? Is your video getting suppressed, even though it's made by a Canadian, because it's not Canadian enough by whatever the CRTC's definition of Canadian enough is? As I said in my opening statement, the CRTC makes, as I'm sure the other witnesses are well aware, they make you jump through all sorts of hoops in order to obtain what is literally called like Canadian certification. Having to vow that, or having to affirm that, there was enough Canadian actors and there was enough Canadian music and it was made in Canada, as well as content stuff. Like, these are all the hoops that you have to jump through. And,
10 seconds?
I think it's a lot of Canadians are going to be oblivious to all of these hoops that they have to jump through. A lot of Canadian YouTubers are oblivious to this discussion that's even happening. So there's I worry very much that a lot of YouTubers are going to wake up one day and they're suddenly going to see their content suppressed. Suddenly they're not going to be making as much money, not getting enough views because governments intervened.
Thank you very much. And now I go to around with the Liberals for 5 minutes. Anthony Housefather. Anthony, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I want to thank each and every one of the witnesses. And Reynolds, I want to thank you for reminding us that traditional Canadian broadcasting has also been seen outside of Canada. I know when we were kids, it was Degrassi. Today, Schitt's Creek, but it's hardly YouTubers that have been the first ones to have ever export their content out of Canada. I also want to say that we're coming at this bill. We haven't talked about this a lot today from a cultural point of view, but also the protection of French original content in Canada. We do have a French-speaking minority in this country that we do need to protect and promote. And I say this, by the way, Mr. McCullough, not to come at you unfairly. I am a proud Canadian who lives in Quebec, who's a Quebecer, who is against Bill 96, who's against Bill 21, has spoken out against those things. But I also believe you have a right to be a French-speaking Canadian and live anywhere in this country and be comfortable, and be an English-speaking Canadian and live in Quebec and be comfortable. And that's why I want to ask you about a couple of things that you said about bilingualism. I found an article where you called French an exotic, dying language, utterly irrelevant to the ordinary lives of most Canadians. I've also found the article that you wrote saying that bilingualism is a threat to Canadian democracy. So let me ask you, as a national government, part of C11 is protecting the French fact across Canada. And I'm asking this question to you in English, not in French, because I'm not trying to score political points on it. Can you tell me why you believe that bilingualism is a threat to Canadian democracy, and whether or not you believe the federal government should not have a role to play in protecting French culture across Canada?
Madam Chair, I do not believe that this is the topic of this committee's discussion. Are not here to have...
Excuse me, I'm sorry, sir, but the committee knows exactly what its topic is. It's Bill C11. Thank you. Please answer the question.
I don't really feel like it's appropriate, Madam Chair, to have a conversation about my views on bilingualism. That does not strike me as the topic of conversation this afternoon.
Do not make those decisions, sir.
Madam Chair, it's okay. I appreciate your jumping in, but I guess, Mr. McCullough, I do believe this bill is about bilingualism. I believe this bill is about ensuring that English language minority content in Quebec and French language minority content in the rest of the country is treated with respect, and that we give the opportunity for people in both languages to express themselves across this country and develop their own original programs. This committee in the last parliament adopted many amendments, Mr. McCullough, to this bill that dealt with this very issue, and we've had many witnesses that have come talk to us about how important this is. So I guess my question is again to you, sir, about this bill. Do you believe that it is fair in C11, which is an important part of C11, that the federal government is protecting French content and French original creation of content across Canada in all forms?
I do not believe that it is the role of the government to impress upon Canadians French content if they don't want it. If Canadians want to watch French YouTube videos, say, there is nothing to prevent them from discovering those videos and watching them. I do not believe it is appropriate for the government to sort of, pass laws or regulations or mandates that would, say, force YouTube to, impose French content on YouTube on YouTube users who don't want to watch that, right? That just to me seems kind of preposterous. I think that this should be ultimately a consumer-driven phenomenon. What consumers want to consume is what they should be free to consume. I don't think it's the role of government to tell them to watch more French videos, to tell them to watch more videos on X, Y, or Z. I don't think it has anything to do with French. It has everything to do with sort of consumer demand. And that's my perspective, because I believe in a free market and I believe in a free market approach to culture. I don't believe in the idea of a government knows best approach to culture in which, politicians or bureaucrats or whatever whatever, get together and sort of say, well, you know what Canadians need to watch more of? It's this, that, and that. And we should use the strength and the power of government to, force this into their, YouTube feeds or their subscription feeds or onto their airwaves or onto the radio or whatever. That's my opinion. I know that that's, perhaps not your opinion, but that's what I believe. I believe in the freedom of consumer choice, and I believe that content should sink or swim based on its popularity.
And I'm giving you the opportunity to express those views here at this committee, and all of Canadians can hear exactly what you think about that, which is important, and which wouldn't have happened in Viktor Orban's Hungary probably, and wouldn't have happened in a lot of the different countries that you've compared the totalitarian regimes to as you've been talking about this bill. So can I ask you, in terms of your comparison, Ms. Thomas just asked you, and you yourself brought up Hungary, you've also compared it to China and Russia. Why do you believe that this bill is about ideologically motivated censorship and thought control? Because that's essentially what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying thought control, but I mean, don't you think that there are some analogies here? Like if the Chinese established a bill like this and said that we're doing this to protect our cultural sovereignty from sort of the evil foreigners and their bad foreign ideas that will corrupt our culture, wouldn't you find that problematic?
I just think we're reading a different bill.
No, but don't you agree, in the same grounds, right? Don't you think that there's something? Sorry.
A second, please. I was asked a question. I need to answer it. How much time do you have left, Mr. Housefather? You have a minute.
A minute. Okay. So again, I don't think I'm reading the same bill.
No, but I'm saying to you, don't you think that there's something problematic about a government that says we need to protect our cultural sovereignty? What would you think if the Chinese said that? Wouldn't you find that problematic?
They say that.
I would think that the Chinese would want to protect Chinese cultural sovereignty, but would do so in a very different way than Canada. In China, you have government that tells people what they need to think, what they need to say, and if they don't say it properly, they can be thrown in prison and they can be put all over. They could suffer terrible consequences.
What are the consequences?
That doesn't happen in Canada. It's my time.
Yes.
That doesn't happen in Canada. I'm trying to answer your question, Mr. McCullough.
Yes.
In Canada, you can come to a parliamentary committee and say whatever you want. You can say whatever you want on your YouTube channel. There's nothing in this bill, and let me be very clear about it, nothing in this bill that takes away your right to freedom of speech in this country. It is a protected right under Section 2 of the Charter, and it is absolutely protected under this bill. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Housefather. And now I think we are going to end our witnesses' question and answer period because we have to go into a business meeting right now. So I just want to thank the witnesses for coming. I want to thank them for their patience while we waited to vote and then thought we could start and then had to go back to a vote. So I want to thank you very much. You offered a lot of insight into some of the complex questions that we on this committee are hearing. And so I want to thank you for coming. And I would like clerk to suspend so that everyone can leave and we can begin our business meeting. last time. Our objective of this meeting is to decide on a deadline for submitting amendments. When we left, there was a suggestion that that deadline be Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. But we will begin to discuss this deadline because we must have one set so that we can get these amendments and the legislative clerks to begin their job. And that will take time. So is there anyone with a hand up wishing to speak to this issue? Yes, I think Peter, Julian, is it Peter? Oh, yeah. Peter and Martin. Okay, Peter, begin, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to move that the deadline be 4 p.m. on Friday, and that the committee accept later amendments by unanimous consent.
Thank you. You're moving this, so
Yep.
We now have a motion on the floor, and I will entertain debate. Mr. Champoux.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chair, I did not raise my hand. I am in agreement with the propositions.
Thank you very much. I thought I saw your hand up.
No.
Some of the debate, shall we? Is there anyone wishing to speak to this? Because if not, yes, yes, clerk.
I'm sorry, do you mean specifically the motion of Mr. Julian? I had the speaking list before he moved his motion.
Well, he's moved his motion, so we now have a speaking list for the motion. Can you please tell me the speaking list? Thank you.
Absolutely. Ms. Thomas, Mr. Waugh, Mr. Albus.
Ms. Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. The motion that has been moved is that our amendment, that our amendments, would be due to the committee by 4:30 p.m. on Friday. I believe that I should finish that, and that if additional amendments are desired, that they could be brought forward and passed with unanimous consent. I think it's been made very clear.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to disturb you, Ms. Thomas, but I don't think that Mr. Julian said that it should be passed with amendments from the floor should be passed with unanimous consent. I don't think that was in his motion.
Perhaps his motion could be circulated so that we could see it, and out of respect for our French colleagues, perhaps that could be done in both official languages.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Julian.
It's a procedural motion, but Ms. Thomas is right to point out that amendments that come in after that deadline would be accepted by the committee by unanimous consent. I mentioned this in our discussions earlier this week, that the goal is to get things going so that all of the work of translation and production can be done, but at the same time, I certainly recognize Ms. Thomas's point that there are amendments that will come in after the deadline, and my goal is to facilitate that. I think we have, on all four sides of this committee table, good faith, and I'm basically acknowledging that the Conservatives want to bring amendments late, that isn't a problem, that we would accept them as is tradition by unanimous consent. So it wouldn't be to block any late amendments, but this would allow us to get things going. We've already been working diligently on our amendments. I know the other parties have as well. So we need to get things started because the production chain takes a long time.
Point of order.
Thank you, Peter. I think we
order.
have a, sorry, I don't know who is raising a point of order, Ken.
It's Member Albus. Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that it's not procedurally correct to do a point of order while someone's done a point of order. But I just wanted to relay the issue that the information that was just shared by my honourable fellow British Columbian, Mr. Julian, was actually debate. So if we are going to be using points of order, they should be procedural and not areas to interfere with debate, because I do believe MP Thomas had the floor. So I will now just pull back, and Madam Chair, I just hope that that would be, that you would perhaps consider ruling in on that, because thank you.
Thank you. There is nothing to rule. The question was asked of Mr. Julian. Would he circulate in writing in English and French his motion? I think that is what Ms. Thomas was suggesting.
But it was a point of order, Madam Chair.
Mr. Julian responded. No, I thought Ms. Thomas was
It was a point of order.
motion.
He actually interrupted MP Thomas. So
I don't know that he interrupted her. He was answering her question. But anyway, and I've ruled thus. Go ahead, Ms. Thomas. Did you think that clarified his motion, or do you need further clarification?
Chair, all I heard was a point of order. I didn't actually hear from you clarification to my question. I'm seeking it from the chair, you. I'm seeking clarification as to this amendment. My understanding is that this amendment says that this motion says our amendments are due by 4:30 p.m. Friday, and that amendments thereafter can only be submitted with unanimous consent. Chair, I am asking you to clarify if this is in fact the case, and I am also asking for this motion to be distributed in writing so that we have it in front of us.
Thank you. I'm clarifying that is indeed what Mr. Julian said, and he clarified it again in response to your original question. But I think if Mr. Julian, do you have this in writing? Can you quickly put it in writing so that we can send it to the committee?
Well, it's a procedural, not a substantive motion, Madam Chair. But if Ms. Thomas, and Ms. Thomas knows that, if she wants me to write it up, it's very simple, 4 p.m. Friday, with late amendments accepted by unanimous consent. But I will write that up unless the Conservatives want friendly amendments, in which case that may change the motion. So I think maybe it's best to hear from the Conservatives whether they want any modifications or any friendly amendments to what I've just proposed.
Could we ask Mr. Mellor, who's here as the legislative clerk, to perhaps comment on this? Mr. Mellor?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask a question to Mr. Julian regarding the UC necessity to provide new amendments once the deadline is passed. The usual practice would be that there would be it would be possible to provide amendments without UC. That was just my question here.
If that is what the Conservatives are looking for, then that would certainly be something I would consider.
So, Madam Chair?
Yes. Who is
It's Dan Albus again, and I do apologize.
Yes,
I'm not a
Mr.
regular member
Albus.
of the committee, and I'm unused to having where the chair is in a different place, so it's difficult to look at you for guidance. I just wanted to find out exactly, because we did have a motion placed by Mr. Julian, and I'm still waiting to get a copy of it because I only caught the front end of it and not the latter end. My understanding, there is some unanimous consent component of it. I'd like to look at that because I'd like to see if we could entertain an amendment to that. But I'm having trouble tracking the debate. So maybe you could suspend for 2 minutes while we have it written up, and we can have it sent out to everyone in both official languages. It's a bit odd when we have someone making a motion and then suddenly saying, "Well, I'm open for friendly amendments," when we don't actually have a copy of what the original one was. And maybe it's just my lack of understanding of what Mr. Julian said, or lack of attention. So I apologize for that, Madam Chair, but I certainly want to be a contributing substitute while I'm here.
Thank you. Quite often on this committee, Mr. Albus, people have put forward amendments on the floor without, because we're on the particular topic, without a written amendment in both languages required. And this is how this committee has worked with good faith and goodwill over the time. So Mr. Julian is reflecting that. But Mr. Julian, instead of us having these little bits of interruptions, perhaps you can write that motion down, and then it will be open for debate and amendments or sub-amendments. In both languages.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We can certainly do that, but if the Conservatives, it's pretty straightforward, and I know we have many experienced parliamentarians around the table. It's 4 p.m. Friday, and what I've suggested is late amendments would be accepted by unanimous consent, but I am very open. I'm very open to any suggestions that the Conservatives have, particularly, or other members of this committee, so that we can get resolution on this.
Mr. Julian, as you heard from Mr. Mellor, it is not necessary to have unanimous consent for motions coming off the floor during a clause by clause. So I would like you to repeat your motion. It is a short motion. I don't believe that anyone needs it in writing. So will you please repeat it and be succinct, Mr. Julian, and repeat it in French, please, for those in the room who do not speak English as their first language.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to simplify it even more. I will try to guess what a Conservative amendment would be, and I will simplify it and simply move that the resolution, the deadline to submit amendments for the committee consideration, clause by clause, be 4 p.m. on Friday. Period. Ça veut dire que
So the deadline and the deadline for submitting amendments for the clause by clause study of C11 is 4 p.m. next Friday.
Next week Friday, Mr. Julian? That's now become very unclear.
This Friday. This Friday.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Now we have a motion on the floor. And would you like to repeat that in French, please, Mr. Julian, for those who do not speak English as their first language?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Je viens de le faire.
I have just done so, but I will do it again. So the deadline to submit amendments for the study, the clause-by-clause study for Bill C11 is this Friday at 4 p.m.
Thank you. We now have... Thank you for the
Heure de
motion.
l'Est a été proposée. Alors, 16 heures.
Eastern time is what was proposed, 4 p.m. Eastern time.
All right. Okay. Therefore, we are open now to debate the motion. Is there any debate? Is there any opposition to the motion? Yes, clerk, let me hear.
I have the speaking list of Ms. Roy, Mr. Albus, Mr. Housefather, Ms. Thomas, Mr. Small.
Mr. War, Mr. Albus, Ms. Thomas, and Mr. Small.
Mr. Housefather
All
is
right.
between Mr. Albus and Ms. Thomas.
All right. All right. All right, and Small. Okay, thank you. Mr. War, begin.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. This kind of has caught me off guard because when I'm looking at the witness list of, the Liberals and us and the Bloc and the NDP, I find that 33 groups that requested to come from the NDP, the Bloc, and the Liberals haven't been heard from yet. So when I look at that, I say, wow, they can't be happy. These are people that took time to write. They want to come in here and express their feelings on C11. And, many are from the government side. Now, I know the minister is coming tomorrow. The department officials have generously said that they will come tomorrow afternoon also, and we've extended tomorrow's time. As you know, we've extended it from 3:30 right till 6:30. So we only have 4 witnesses coming in the first hour tomorrow. So by my numbers, we have many people that have expressed a major concern, some supportive of this bill, some not supportive of this bill, and some important groups. I look at APTN TV, and we haven't heard from them, and that's an NDP witness. And, you know, APTN is one of the reasons why they had this, you know, the CRTC. I don't have to tell you, Madam Chair, that CBC, the public broadcaster, wasn't doing their job in representing the people of this country. And that's why APTN TV got started in Winnipeg and has spread on, and I give the CRTC credit, that it is a mandatory station coast to coast now. And I think we need to hear from them because there is some issues with C11. And I just picked them out because, you know, it is Mr. Julian's wish to have all, you know, to get everything together by 4 o'clock Eastern time on Friday. And I'm surprised that he wouldn't want to hear from APTN. I mean, they're one of the major forces in this country. We don't have a lot of ethnic organizations that we've heard from. We've heard from one today that was quite shocking, actually, that, you know, they're not being recognized by Canadian television, whether it's Bell, Global, or even the public broadcaster, and they've been shut out. And so we have lots to consider here. And I think APTN is one of the, you know, and we're talking traditional broadcaster here. And that's where I come from, and I really want to hear from them. I'd like to hear from National Community and Campus Radio. They're another organization, Madam Chair, that has been recommended here by the NDP that obviously they don't seem to care if they come to committee or not.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Point of order.
Mr. Julian?
Yeah. Mr. Waugh is making a number of comments that are absolutely inappropriate. We've seen the Conservative filibuster all last night. We had witnesses having to wait for hours. So I think the fact that we have already accepted that amendments can come in after the deadline and we just want to get things started, I think should maybe mean that Conservatives should just allow the motion to go forward. They will have the opportunity to hear other witnesses, and they will have the opportunity to submit amendments after that date.
We have a hard stop at 7:30. And we are back where we started, where this is an attempt to never get to this decision. And I would like to remind everybody very quickly that when we passed a motion in good faith, unanimously passed by this committee, it read that the committee hear witnesses on the topic of Bill C-11, an act to amend the Broadcasting Act and to make related amendments, blah. But for one meeting lasting 5 hours during the week of May 23rd, 2022, and that the committee continued to hear witnesses for an additional 3 meetings lasting 5 hours each during the week of May the 30th, 2022. We are in that week right now. And again, this was a clear motion that was intended to define what we do. And we are now finding that this is not being, it was unanimously passed. And so we have never, at least while I am chairing this committee, had an exhaustive list of witnesses. We make a decision when we're going to do work that we will let that work last a certain number of time with a deadline. And then that deadline is stuck to. And if we didn't get all the witnesses in that deadline, well, we didn't. The clerk works very hard to call witnesses. Many witnesses cannot come during this motion that had been moved and unanimously passed. And so we have finished our witness. We have achieved 20 hours. We have achieved 19 hours this week. It was asked for 20 hours in total. We have an extra hour. This committee now has 20 hours. It has fulfilled the request unanimously agreed upon in the motion that I just read to you. So we now need to move forward in the tradition of committees. There was no minimum attached to those 20 meetings, I may add. And so we are now move to the next phase, which is to set a deadline for amendments. And so we have a hard stop, as I said, at 7:30. And so we have a few more minutes for this motion that's on the floor, which is in keeping with what our tradition has been and what we said. And I would like to hear us not ask for us to go over a motion already duly passed and unanimously passed by this committee.
Well, Madam Chair, I think I had the floor, if you don't mind me saying that. I mean, I haven't given it up.
No, you haven't. But you may have to give it up, Mr. Waugh, because we have to leave. We do not have a room to meet in, and we do not have any staff to continue to support this meeting.
Well, I can stay. I'll be by myself, and I often talk about.
Do yourself?
I often talk to myself.
You can talk to me.
As you probably have noticed in the meetings. No, I just, Madam Chair, I just think when I looked at some of the witnesses, Spotify, for God's sake, it's on everybody's phone and we haven't heard from them. I mean, that is the new media. I mean, we heard from JJ today talking about the new media. I come from the traditional media. I went after Bell today. I'd like to talk to APTN. I have other issues with the radio and television industry. But the new media, Madam Chair, as we heard today from JJ and others, need to be very front and center because, we're going back 31 years on the broadcasting bill, and I know it needs to be modernized, but look at the legacy that this committee will leave once this bill does go through the House. Is it going to be another 31 years, Madam Chair, before we do another an issue with, and it's properly called Streaming Act now, because it is going to change. So I think we need to talk about the new media as much as we talk about the tradition. I don't think we've had a chance around the table to discuss that. We just heard from one guest here today that opened a lot of eyes on the freedom of expression and doing it his way. And maybe I don't listen to him as much, but obviously he has a big following. And some of these YouTubers have bigger followings than Bell, have bigger followings than Global. And that's where this industry is going right now. And that's where CE11 needs to go. The Streaming Act. It was changed from the Broadcasting Act to the Streaming Act for a very good reason. It's the 21st century. The Broadcasting Act is archaic. We need to move forward. And streaming is going
Appel au
to be
règlement, Madame la Présidente, s'il vous plaît.
Point of order, Madam Chair. With all due respect for my colleague, Mr. Waugh, for whom I have a lot of respect, I just want to express some disappointment because we're leaving for the parliamentary break and we did discuss the number of hours that would be given to witnesses. There were some dissensions, some who wanted more time, some who wanted less. But we had discussed with the Conservatives and we had agreed on 20 hours. That was a compromise that we had made. And here's my disappointment. Normally, we're often in disagreement with the Conservative colleagues. Sometimes we agree with them, but we can always count on them to keep their word when we come on up to a consensus. So I'm disappointed in their current behavior. And so I would like to propose a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. There's anyone opposing that motion? No, then it is time that we leave. Thank you very much, everyone. We will continue the business meeting until we get a deadline for the amendments. So that will have to return tomorrow. Thank you.